I was asked recently if I was a socialist, and I replied that that term is meaningless because it has too many definitions. So, to ask somebody if you are a socialist, you first need to define what you mean by socialist, right? Which definition of socialist are you, you know, using as a premise for your question? So, I want to go ahead and make this short video answering that. Am I a socialist? Well, I I don't think a person can be a socialist because socialism is a mode of production from the perspective of Marxism. Socialism is a political economy that is premised upon workers' control of the means of production. And I define socialism in Marxist terms. So, socialism is a political economy that is premised upon workers' control of the means of production. That means the land and the industrial base, industrial technological base, and the land are in control of the workers, the farmers, and the factory and the industrial workers. In this polity, the workers have expropriated the capital, the land, and the industrial technological base from the capitalist owners. They have physically seized them and expropriated them, the means of production, and taking control over them. And then on the premise of that, then they proceed to create a superstructure, which is the state. And that state is bodies of armed men, which is in the form of a workers' militia that protects the collectivized property forms and include land, industrial base, and technology, right? So then once the body of armed men called the workers' militia is in control of, it's in control, and the workers and the farmers are in control of their land and the means of production under the protection of the workers' militia, then you can set up something called Soviets, which is councils of elected and recallable workplace delegates, or councils of elected and recallable, representatives from the farmers' cooperatives. So, and then these people are the ones who are in charge of making legislation for the polity, and then they appoint an executive committee to enforce the legislation, which is, the bodies of our men, the workers' militia, is the effective enforcer. That is how a Marxist state works. So the definition of socialism that I work with is based on Marxist premises, and that understand the nature of the state as bodies of armed men. Okay. The executive committee of the Soviet is an executive committee for managing the collective affairs of the working class. And that is the effective government of a socialist polity. That is what I mean by socialism, not welfareism. Supplying welfare benefits to people under capitalism works to preserve capitalism is not socialism. So now the provision of in a socialist polity, of course, the provision, because capitalism has been expropriated, things like healthcare, housing, education, food, clothing are decommodified. So basic human needs are decommodified and supplied by the society. The only not where I differ with most socialists is that I believe that that which is not a social need, things that are not essential can be supplied by a free market, a deregulated free market in consumer goods. So if everybody will get healthcare, education, housing, clothing, and food, anything else, such as an MP3 player, or luxury items, a luxury item, a pair of cool sunglasses or something like that. Things that are not really essential to survival or or basic social need. Those things can be supplied by a deregulated consumer market. That is where entrepreneurs, supply the workers with consumer goods, non-essential consumer goods, and luxury consumer goods at a profit, at a reasonable profit, on tax. I don't think that market should be taxed. So yeah, so that's my belief. And of course, in the type of socialist polity that I advocate for, I believe in sound money. Money has to have value. So I mean, and money doesn't need to be a large currency. You can break up money into smaller currencies. You could have currencies inside. Let's say that there's a group of farmers cooperatives in an enclave. They could have their own currency in that little enclave, backed by gold and silver. Or like, let's say that there's like in Chile in the during the Allende government, they had the cordones, right? Groups of factories that were under the control of workers federated themselves into cordones. In a group of cordones, you could have your own gold and silver backed currency. I mean, you can break up currency into smaller currencies, all gold, silver, and gold backed. You don't need to have a universal currency. You don't need to do that. Vladimir Lenin, during the new economic policy, had the charbonnet, the gold-backed ruble. Okay, Lenin believed in sound money. So yeah. I mean, as far as the consumer market, I would run that like as a completely deregulated private thing. The only thing that would be regulated is quality, of course, quality. But other than that, people should be supplied with whatever, anything extra to basic needs, the luxury stuff, and the non-essential stuff can be supplied by a free market in consumer goods. Much better, more efficient, because then you have competition will keep prices, affordable, and also will ensure quality. Competition ensures quality and affordability. So entrepreneurs will supply the workers and the farmers, right? Yeah, so the type of socialist polity that I envision as a transition to communism would be a society of industrial workers, farmers, freelance entrepreneurs, and militia soldiers, and yeah, and that's it, and I mean, I understand socialism to be a transitory stage because I look at Marxist historiography. It's a transition between socialism is a transition between the capitalist mode of production and the communist mode of production. So eventually, the communist mode of production emerges from the socialism. So in the communist mode of production is a society where classes cease to exist, where money will no longer be necessary. So sound money is a temporary measure that eventually will become unnecessary. It can be phased out, and where the state withers away. It will, people will be able to, once you eliminate economic scarcity and all these problems, people will become self-governing. You will need government less and less. So eventually you could even start phasing out the militia. And ultimately, another thing that will happen in communism is that, culturally and politically imposed gender roles will be abolished or eliminated. There will be no gender. There will be no race under communism. There will only be workers who happen to have a vagina or workers who happen to have a penis, and that's it. And that's all. That carries with it no meaning other than that. What matters about the individual under socialism is your ability to participate in production, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. What you do with your penis or your vagina is of no consequence to the polity. You can choose to reproduce or not, it's your problem. Yeah, so under communism, there will be no classes, no money. Money will be phased out, no state, and no gender or race. Race also will have absolutely no meaning under socialism and communism. Absolutely not. You know, so-called ethnic features and whatever that will have no meaning. Ethnicity, race will have absolutely no meaning under socialism and communism. Because the level of melatonin on your skin, or that you have slanted eyes or not, or that you have blonde hair or pink hair or whatever, means absolutely nothing. Yeah, you're simply an individual who happens to have blonde hair and a penis, or an individual who happens to have slanted eyes and a vagina, but a worker, and that's it. individual workers. And, yeah. So what matters again in under communism and socialism is your ability to produce, your production capability. And once you reach a certain age and you're no longer productive, you retire, and your needs will be taken care of because you contributed already to the polity with your work when you were at your prime. So there will be only like in under socialism, people will work only 4 hours per day. Because obviously the purpose of life is not to work. The purpose of life is to live life. So you will work only 4 hours a day, and the rest of the time is your time to do what you want. Um, yeah, it's a 4 hour work day, and because there is a 4 hour work day, unemployment will be eliminated. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, so that is the answer to the question. What am I a socialist? Well, no, you cannot be a socialist. Nobody can be a socialist or a capitalist. Because capitalism and socialism, or a communist, nobody can be a communist, because capitalism, socialism, and communism are modes of production, not individual attitudes or a lifestyle or whatever. So there are no socialists, there are no communists, and there are no capitalists. Nobody can be that. So the statement "I am a communist" is meaningless, or the statement "I am a socialist" is meaningless, because you're referring to a mode of production, not a way of being, or an essential characteristic or an identity. Communism is not an identity. It's a mode of production. Socialism is not an identity. It's a mode of production. Capitalism is not an identity. It's a mode of production.